Eastern Cape MEC for Finance, Mlungisi Mvoko, tabled the province's 97.6 billion rand budget in Bhisho on Tuesday. He announced that there will be no additional resources allocated to the departments for the 2025 Medium-Term Expenditure Framework. He says departments must identify alternative funding sources. To unpack this further for us, I'm now joined by the head of the Finance Department, Mlungisi Mvoko. Mr. Mvoko, good afternoon and thank you so much for joining us.
Yeah, Manbulise kuwe Sister Jessica and the listeners at home.
Mr. Mvoko, no additional resources for departments. What exactly does this mean? What additional funding must the departments find and how will it impact on the service delivery in the province?
No, thanks, Sister Jessica. Yeah, I think, as you know, our budget was mainly coming from different sources. That is national and also some of the sources from the province. It meant then, I think, one way or the other, if we're not getting enough from national, we have to find something within the province. And I think if provincial fiscus find us tough in order to fund into it. I think the whole kind of an economic cycle, the supply and demand element which are embedded, kind of affected us one way or the other. So, which meant then that I think we had to find a way on how to deal with it. That's why we thought that one of the, call it budget strategy into it was to say we have to more or less reprioritize the resources which we have, giving to the needy into it and take it from just the necessary ones in the process. So what we've done then, we set as part of the strategy, we reprioritize, and there's a lot of reprioritization which has happened within the province in order to fund the necessary needs so that at least the basic needs and the basic services are actually sustained within the system. And I think based on that, there's been a lot of balancing element into it. But at the same time, we had to kind of, there were some which we had to, delve in our, call it reserves, one or the other, in order to fund the deficit which we had in it. So for us to sustain resources into it, we have to look at all kinds of a front. We can't afford to pass be reckless in terms of what it is there. Otherwise, there will be no tomorrow. And we have to think of no tomorrow. And I know sometimes bakhona umuntu athi andikhathalelanga ingomso as long as inamhlanje ndilifumene. So now we have to check by ingomso, what does it bring us? And the tomorrow must be better than today. And the yesterday, today must be better than yesterday. So I think that's all that embeds our budgeting process.
Well, what factors did your department have to consider when putting together this budget?
There are a lot of things which come through. One fundamental is which I've alluded earlier, the issues of Maslow's hierarchy of needs and wants. Have the needs been covered more than the wants? Because the wants sometimes becomes, the frills which are necessary in terms of the process which is there. But what we've covered, basically, you will find the basic element, for example, education, health, which we normally have, what we call it, the standards which we set in the non-negotiables. So all those learners, they must be funded. There should be a teacher in front of the learners. There need to be some food which is available to them. There need to be a certain level of transportation, at least, although it will cover it not in full. But there need to be also element of water and sanitation, although it comes from a grant level. So we need to make sure that those balance it up. And also looking in terms of now the particular roads which are actually there. So we balance it up, but at the same time, as Ilibali, it's important to grow our economy. And that's why the economic levers becomes necessary into it. Otherwise, we'll become stagnant in that kind of a process because of what we are stuck with the element of trying to fit in the social sector, into it. So that's fundamental into it. And I think, as you know, for example, we're here in Gqeberha, there are certain things which we've kind of invested appropriately in order to make sure that the Gqeberha on its own kind of grows progressively.
Well, Mlungisi Mvoko described this year's budget as a budget for inclusive growth and development through government allocative efficiency. How does this reflect on the distribution of the budget?
That's a fundamental, theme into it, because we're talking about allocative efficacy, but within that, we're also speaking about inclusive growth into it. So, which means that we've got to realize that there are inefficiencies within the system. And this is why when we're talking about how we make sure that there's a repartization, we look at those inefficiencies within the system. And this is what we had to juggle around as part of the process. And that involved a lot of analysis in terms of what we need to do. Taking money from here, allocating to there, but at the same time, keeping to the baseline. Which is there. So we made sure then that I think we balance it appropriately so that at least not a lot of sectors suffers into it, but at the same time creating a system which we're able now to look at service delivery imperative, because ultimately the issue which we want to look at, or the ultimate end, is the service delivery. And I think the main element when we collect resources and also we deliver these resources is to make sure that there is improvement of the life of our people. And I think if you've seen, since 1994, there's been significant improvement which has happened to our people. And that has not happened by itself or by chance. It's through a blend kind of. You'll know then that there was a 2030 vision which was envisaged in terms of the process. And yes, we've not achieved all the targets in terms of that vision, which is actual, but we've actually made sure that at least we're moving towards that. There are millennium goals which are actually there, but the 2030 vision was more or less from a national kind of a front. And I think we've done well, at least to provide the needed basic services and also to improve the poverty level of our people, as much as we say there's still a lot to be done.
Well, Mr. Majeke, just before I let you go, the province has become more prone to natural disasters, which has been catered for in the budget. Now, 295.5 million has been set aside for the 2025 and 2026 financial year, and 788.2 million rand in the Medium-Term Expenditure Framework. What disaster areas of the province will this money be allocated for first?
That amount makes something like 3.4%, Sister of our provincial allocation in terms of infrastructure. And the main ones in the process, I think 98 million goes through to human settlement. Of course, you know then that normally the disaster, as much as it hits everyone else, the households are the one who get the bigger impact into it. And we got to realize then that I think human settlement you need to, so about 98 million goes to that. The second highest in terms of the allocation is the education. It's about 78 million of that allocation. Of course, in education is the schools. Again, one need to look at social determinants in terms of now, or social determination element that, schools are the fundamental base where everyone else needs to be taught in terms of it. And without you being taught into it, it means then over a longer run, you are going to be dependent in terms of now of our system. So if you invest on the basic social determinants, that is that, and of course the health one, which then that it's one of the second determinant in terms of it, determination into it, that you need to have a good health in terms of, that means facilities get to be hit differently into it. So it's about 29 million of that, and there are others which at a smaller scale. So that makes about, but further and above that, Sister Jessica, is that we know then that we need to put also extra in terms of it. We've reserved 60 million, over and above that, 60 million into the reserves, so that we then augment it. But after, of course, a proper assessment which need to be done, so that the element of emergency is kind of, because no one else in real essence, that's why it's called emergency. You know, yes, what we're trying to do is a proactive sense from a provincial government, that we create, at least we know that the province get to be hit differently with these things, and we've got no control of the weather. And we've analyzed the trend where this kind of happens into it. But they need to be the start. We know then that there's national disaster funding which comes through, which we then, at least this gives us a base of having a start where we are. Since we those we know that the province is more prone into it. It's mostly coastal side, which gets to be hit through the terrain, the rains, the calamity which come to it. So within that, with that, at least, we're not saying it's enough, Sister Jessica. I'm just saying at least it will provide a proper base for the needed basic maintenance and upgrade which is necessary after it's been those facilities are kind of hit by the disaster.